Good morning. Welcome to our Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, December the 3rd, 2019. I'd like to call this meeting to order at this time and ask if there's any declaration of interest. Seeing none, I will move to community announcements. I know it's been very busy. Perhaps I could start with Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just looking forward to this weekend and my role as Council Liaison to the Sharon Temple. Their old-fashioned Christmas event is happening on Sunday afternoon. I think it's 11:30 to 4 or something like that. Admission is free. The only cost is if you would like to do crafts with the kids, but there's horse-drawn carriages and festive, I believe there's a festive marketplace in the temple itself. So a nice afternoon to be had celebrating this season. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to say we had a great time Saturday morning opening Vince's Market. Well attended. There was a lineup there, so that's great to see economic development in East Gwillimbury. Again, I would, looking forward, I would remind people that North Union Hall has their Christmas Carol sing-along this Friday at 7 p.m. if you can make it. That's always a great event. As well, the Mount Albert Village Association's having, at the same time, this Friday at 7 p.m. having their Christmas tree lighting, and there'll be hot chocolate and carols afterwards. And of course, on Saturday is our Santa Claus Parade put on by the Lions Club in Mount Albert, and it starts at 11 a.m. Santa is a busy man this week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carruthers.
I have two announcements. First, today is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and it's a chance for us to recognize the challenges faced by those with disabilities and celebrate the progress individuals and disability communities have made around the world. My second announcement is that the Holland Landing Community Group is proud to announce that they will be hosting a holiday lights competition, which started December the 1st. It's a chance to light up the landing. Residents and businesses in Holland Landing will be encouraged to put out their holiday lights, and the businesses and homes will be judged on December the 19th, with winners announced on the 20th on the town's website. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Persechini.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I also visited Vince, but it brought me back memories of the days that Whipper Watson used to shop there, and also John Candy. And Whipper would say, "He's here now, so come on down if you want to meet him." So I rushed there to meet John Candy. So it brought me back a lot of memories. So from a little corner store, and look what it's today. And I'm very proud that they're in Sharon, and I hope the people enjoy as much as I've enjoyed all these years. So that was great, and I look forward to many more shopping over there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Crone sort of took everything.
We'll start at the other side next month.
But I just want to also mention that as well as the tree lighting going on, there is a band that's coming down, I believe, from Keswick Sutton area that will be playing inside the hall with the music, and a couple of other musicians will be there as well. And the lights and the wreaths are all up on the streets, and it looks very, very nice during the evening. And that's just about it for my area in Mount Albert.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of things, again, to go a little bit further with what Councillor Carruthers says. We're really looking forward to the Light Up the Landing event. We want to see how that one's going to work out. We have a great group with that community group, and we're thinking that this one's going to work out really well. Again, congratulations to Vince's. It was interesting to look at the old picture on the wall there, and I understand there's another old one that I remember well that's going to end up in the community room, so I'm told, up there. So that will be interesting to see. Other than that, had a great lunch with the Golden Anchors a couple of weeks ago. Had a few laughs there. It was good to get out and talk to all those people. And other than that, I'm looking forward to a little bit of a walk around Mount Albert on Saturday during the parade. Thanks.
Thank you very much. It's been a busy time, and I know the next couple of weeks are going to even be busier. as well as what's been mentioned here. I was at the Niche Decor. They held their annual Niche Night Decor event, and it's a fundraising event for the food pantry, and it was packed. It's a wonderful place to go and enjoy the evening. The opening of Vince's, I think it was nostalgic for a lot of us who've been in the community a long time, from seeing the little fruit market that was on the corner to something as wonderful as they have put together now. I know it'll be a big hit for our community, and we're wishing them all the very best for business for many years to come. Last week, I attended an announcement with Minister Christine Elliott. The announcement addressed the Ontario delivering on its commitment to end hallway healthcare and build a connected, sustainable healthcare system centered around the needs of patients. And Southlake has met their goals, and they are one of the first ones that will be up and running. So that's pretty exciting for all of us in the catchment area of Southlake. Also, as we all know, Council has held 3 meetings with staff to discuss and deliberate our budget for 2020. I'm confident that we've made good progress so far, and I'd like to thank Council for their valued input, and also extend thanks to staff for their hard work and long hours in bringing forward an acceptable budget and addressing the concerns and suggestions of our Council. We're certainly close to finalizing, not there yet, but we're pretty close, and I just wanted to share that. We have a couple of upcoming events with the holiday season. The town's toy and food drive is now underway. Donated items will assist local families, and we have our tree in our atrium here, and people, I know that residents come in and leave gifts and food to be distributed. Also, we had earlier about the North Union Carol Sing and the Mount Albert Village Tree lighting, both on the same night, so that'll be a busy night for people. And the Santa Claus Parade is the following morning, so don't stay out too late, because it starts in good time, and it's quite a good parade in Mount Albert. December 10th, East Gwillimbury Chamber of Commerce is hosting their monthly breakfast meeting at the Lions and Sun Lounge. The town is the sponsor of the breakfast, and I'll be delivering a presentation highlighting the menu accomplishments for 2019. So I know that a lot of people have already purchase their tickets, but if you haven't, then it would be important to do so they can plan on the numbers that they're going to be having. This is the last month of the year, and our monthly attributes that we talk about around the room. We highlight every month that we're here, and December is pick your own. My birthday's in July. I kind of like the July one. I do what I do is right and ensure there is no difference between what I say and what I do. And with that, we will start into the remainder of our agenda. We have no presentations at this time, is that correct?
That is correct, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And I do not have any deputations listed, is that also correct?
That is correct, Madam Mayor, and I'd just like to say happy anniversary to Council. 1 year ago tomorrow, you were all in here getting your swearing into the inaugural event, and looking back over the year, we've done quite a bit of work, 2 budgets and strat plan, and we look forward to working with you the next 2 to 3 years.
Thank you. A lot of miles in a year that we've gone. Thank you very much. We are at item F, and that's Legal and Council Support Services with Councillor Foster in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We do have one item on the agenda this morning. It's Legal and Council Support Services 2019-18, proposal for brokerage and insurance services. Mr. Horner, anything for committee?
Just briefly, this is a really good news story. We recently went to market with the N6 municipalities for brokerage services and also insurance coverage for 2020. And at the time we went out to market, we were told to expect an increase in premium, but we're very happy to report that actually the one of the bids was quite competitive, and we're able to demonstrate a 25% premium savings for 2020. So a very good news story, and happy to take any questions from council.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. Can I have a mover for this? Councillor Crone.
I have a comment.
Are there any questions from committee?
I
Persechini?
just want to say that I'm very pleased because when it was $1 million and we discussed, I talked to Mark and they said, we got to go back and do something about this. And either we don't pay it all at once, we get a discount, or something should happen, or quarterly, whatever. And now this is even better. I love it. Thank you very, very much. Good news.
Councillor Crone?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions. First of all, congratulations. It is nice to get a price drop, especially in insurance. That's rare these days. And I think it shows that there is value in shopping around. So my questions are, I was a little surprised that we only had two people come back to Brokerage come back and on the bid. I know personally know that there's a few big houses that play in this game. So I was a little surprised to see the two. I was just wondering how we went to market with this, how we advertised for it, and secondly, I just want to know does the package include coverage for our fleet?
The package does include fleet coverage for the vehicles. So far as the advertising went for the RFP, I can't speak to that, but I think perhaps Mr. Proud can.
Is it working now? There we go. Good morning. To answer that question, the advertisement was done through our Bids and Tenders website. Notification went out, I believe, through the consultant to the industry to sort of let them know that this was coming. And I think one of the reasons that we saw a decrease is because of the perceived hardening in the market. And we were told before entering into the process that one of the potential bidders was not going to submit a bid this time around. The previous RFP that we did in 2011, we had three proponents that bid. JLT, who has now been put into marsh. You have BFL, and then Omex, who is no longer around. So, in terms of the bidders that we had last night or last time around that are still operating, we still had those two. But got an indication that, due to the market right now, there's not a lot of interest in playing in the municipal market. And I think that sort of speaks even more to the discount that we got and how good of a program that we run here in EG.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Mr. Horner, anything further for committee?
Just one other item. Yesterday morning, we had a LPAT settlement conference. Legal and planning were attending, and just very happy to report that the Queensville Phase 5 development has fully settled. It was great to have the resident association on the phone, and the residents consented to the settlement. They're very happy that their concerns were addressed, really primarily with some larger abutting lots adjacent to their properties, some fencing and some landscaping. So really a very good result, and happy to report a good event with planning. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. That sounds good. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Just wondering if I could have if I could make a motion to receive that verbal update so that we have it on the record that he's advised us.
Absolutely. Mr. Lamani, you have that? And all in favor to receive? And that's carried. Madam Mayor?
Thank you. We are at item G, and that's Development Services with Councillor Crone in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have 3 items on the agenda today. We'll start with the Joint Development Services, Corporate Services, and Community Infrastructure and Environmental Services Report, P 2019-34, Planning for Future Growth, Building Complete Communities as Part of the Urban Area Through Regions Municipal Comprehensive Review. Catch my breath. Mr. Ramuno, do you have anything to add to that?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple comments just for council and the general public. I mean, the purpose of this report is to seek council's formal endorsement of the inclusion of the remainder of the town's wipeout lands as urban areas, part of the region's current MCR official plan update. in order for to allow the town to move forward to comprehensively plan for our future employment and residential growth. This report is a follow-up to a couple of previous reports I provided council back in May, July, also a workshop in June dealing with growth management and future growth for the municipality. And I think it's timely now that we have a formal resolution from council to the region so that the region can be informed of our town's position as they move forward, the region that is, in preparing their land budget and their population employment forecasting as part of the growth plan amendment changes. And as you're aware, the region will have a new official plan update presented to regional council towards the end of 2020. I think it's also timely in that we've informed council of a couple of recent changes from the province. Number one being their Bill 108, the housing action plan, more homes and more choices. It's a recent, a stronger policy emphasis on a greater housing supply and diversity of housing choices. So again, this really falls into informing the region's update to their official plan. And it really enables the town to take the lead in moving forward to once and for all comprehensively plan for our future growth, as well as ensuring that we're in control of phasing of development, as opposed to one of the other recent changes or clarifications from the province was to allow private applications or initiatives for urban boundary expansion. So this would keep us in the driver's seat.
Okay, and can I have a mover for this, please? Councillor Persechini. Are there any questions? Councillor Carruthers.
I know, speaking with our residents, that they want a halt on development. And I think that by endorsing the inclusion of the white belt lands, we're not listening to them. And I think that I've listened to the presentations, I've read the information that's been sent, and I think we need to push back a little bit on this. And, governments change and policies change. And this is a long ways out still that we would be looking at these lands for building. I don't think it's the time yet to be saying yes to further land for development. When we talk about more housing choices, it sounds good, but what ends up happening is these huge, big, very expensive homes get built and that still aren't affordable. So I think it's time to push back and not keep expanding our urban boundaries. I'll be voting no to the endorsement.
Are there any other questions? I guess for myself, I'm concerned that that if we say no to this, we could still lose control, and that a developer could take us. And Mr. Ramona, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a developer could take us to LPAT and then force our hand and develop the land anyway. So, with all the respect to Councillor Carruthers, I think wanting to halt development, we would actually be losing greater control by not supporting this. Mr. Ramona, do you have any comments on that?
Yes, to you, Mr. Chair. I mean, that's correct, and I think we provided the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing's correspondence about a week ago, and that was a letter to all upper tier and local tier municipalities, just clarifying one of the policies in the growth plan, which indicated that urban boundary expansions up to 100 acres are permitted. They're unlimited, and they can be initiated by private landowners. So that would then put a municipality in a situation in the region of dealing with these multiple initiatives for boundary expansion. So by us taking control, working with the region, we're able to deal with ensuring that phasing happens as we want to see it in developing that comprehensive plan. Because again, just going back in time, I mean, we'll use Queensville as an example. From a timing perspective, that plan, secondary plan, was approved back in the mid 90s. So And it was only a couple of years ago that we started seeing some housing develop there, because the planning for these new communities just take, it does take decades. So, and the reason, my advice to council is to deal with it now is because we're going through an update. The region's going through an update. If we don't get in front of this now, it could be another 10 or 10 plus years. We've received some good news from the region that it seems like the Minister of the Environment has approved one of the earlier infrastructure projects that the region was waiting for, Duffins Creek outfall expansion. And they're hoping that the approval of the EA for the Upper York is imminent. So if that happens, and we know that project is really dependent on our future White Belt expansion, not only residential, but the employment growth in town of East Gwillimbury to help finance and pay for that Upper York servicing scheme. So, but again, I understand the concern that, we think we're opening up too much land, but by bringing this into our urban boundary as part of our next OP update, which will take a couple of years to complete, we've just initiated the planning. Then we've got to deal with the detailed secondary plans of subdivision, etc. And that can take, years. If we use Queensville as an example, it's 20 plus years. So, but we can be in control of our destiny as opposed to having to deal with private amendments that are appealed to LPAT, and we may not be able to defend those. If we do the planning up front, we'll be in a better position to defend any other applications that come in that don't agree with that, in which the council's in support of from a timing perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. Councillor Ridley-Comenti, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question about the development or the ability for private parties to bring OP amendments. My understanding was that they could always, when we've seen them come to us before, where a developer requires an official plan amendment in order to implement something that they would like to do on their lands. Is it the distinction between a land use, or is it that urban boundary that's new? I'm trying to see what's different here, because I know we've had them come before us before.
Mr. Ramuno?
To you, Mr. Chair. No, that's a good point. So, private applications, developers can always submit their applications. The difference here with respect to the correspondence we received from the minister last week deals specifically with urban boundary expansions. So in the past, urban boundary expansions couldn't be dealt with by private applications. They had to be dealt with by as part of the regional comprehensive review in the local municipality in their OP update. So this deals with the ability for private applications to deal with urban boundary expansions. That is bringing in those white belt lands into the urban specifically.
Mr. Chair, I think that's an important distinction where before, the municipality and the public sector was in control of what went first, and now it could potentially be a bit of the Wild West. For me, this is one of those things where you hold your nose and you move it forward simply because it allows you to remain in the driver's seat. And for me, the only reason why I would propose that we would move forward is that it keeps us in the driver's seat, and that through those secondary plans, we can control phasing, and we can say through our secondary plan process, you can't, yes, this is part of our urban built boundary, but it's not going to be developed until such and such a milestone is met. And for me, that's the only reason why I would support it, is that we retain control, and I would like to see some of that reflection of phasing in the language when we're talking about the secondary plans, so that we're indicating that it's not just, we're going to move everything that's white into the pink in the official plan and away we go. I don't think that's the plan here at all. At least it isn't from where I sit. Thank you.
Councillor Carruthers?
Can we separate out the recommendations so that the endorsement is separate from the receipt, report back, and forwarding of the report?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that. Councillor Persechini, do you submit for this friendly amendment that we do the endorsement, or the receipt first and then the endorsement second? Okay. All right. Mr. Clerk, you're good with that? Okay. Are there any other questions? If not, Mr. Webster?
I just wanted to provide a little context again for the public record. This report was initially called, to be frank with you, Planning for Future Growth, Inclusion of White Belt Lands. And I think we have to go to a higher level. We report the elected officials. We have a strategic plan that talks about complete communities. And there seems to be a fixation on housing and urban sprawl and those types of things. And really what I think we are trying to deliver is a complete community. Our biggest challenge moving forward is employment, and we certainly feel that the long term and the servicing of our entire community and getting a critical mass will assist with employment and getting a job inertia and some job creation. We want to play, frankly, some catch up on the employment side. Mr. Ramuno indicated lengthy timeframes. He actually was a little off, Marco, I have to correct you. Queensville was approved in '89. It's closer to 30 years than 20 years. And so the time frames are very long to get things accomplished. I will remind everybody that our council approved its last official plan the first time it was consolidated in 2010. And we are now less than a month away from 2020. And I think we are working, these processes take so long, you're updating your master plans, that probably the next time that this council will have an opportunity to comprehensively update its master plans will be in the 2030 timeframe. And we're mindful that a complete community includes a good mix of housing. I think council can establish some standards to talk about, but not only phasing, but what kinds of development it wants to see, maybe promote affordability and some ownership, sustainability. That we could raise the bar on standards for development from an environmental perspective for this future growth for sure. And the final one is the difference between being a community that might be 50,000 and a community that might be 100,000 is significant. If our goals are to potentially attract a post-secondary education institution, if our goals are to have a robust healthcare system that this community supports rather than having to drive outside of our community, and if our goals are to have a really vibrant transit system, you have to raise the level of activity. And so that's really this report Mr. Ramuno's brought forward is a multi-department report, and it's really about a complete community in the long term. So I just wanted to put a little context to it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Webster. It's appreciated. So, well, let me call first a vote on the receipt of this motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion is passed. Could I have a mover for the endorsement of this motion? Moved by Councillor Morton. Last chance for any questions. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to item 2. It's the Development Services Planning Branch Report, P 2019-59, establishing the Town of East Gwillimbury Heritage Salvage and Reuse Program. Mr. Ramuno, would you like to update us on this?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. So we did receive direction from the Heritage Advisory Committee and then Council some time ago to report back on the potential of a heritage salvage and reuse program to deal with some of the heritage components of buildings that are where owners are seeking either alteration or demolition of those listed heritage structures. So we've really only established, we don't really have much detail at this time. We really want to establish some of the principles that we want to be, we'll be working on in a future report back in sometime in the new year with respect to some of the key criteria that we need to look at that we've listed in the report. Number one would be sort of determining what would be, those items that would be considered appropriate for salvage, and that would result from an evaluation between staff and the Heritage Advisory Committee, when those properties are brought forth. The other key component would be then identifying sort of how and where we store these materials and how we're going to deal with cataloging and offering these materials to members of the public for reuse in other buildings in town. So again, it's really just establishing those principles that will provide greater detail early in 2020 for Council's consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. I think this is welcome news. I've heard a lot of my colleagues here lament about the fact that we have heritage properties and we're losing them. And this is what I hope will be the first phase of a overall heritage strategy. Can I have a mover for this, please? Councillor Foster? Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to congratulate Marco and his group for putting this together. I think it hits all the points that the Heritage group and the people sitting at this table have been talking about. I find some very interesting wording in there, some things that I think are very encouraging. And when you talk about, the salvage criteria and the reuse of materials on site, I think is really important. I look forward to see how we're going to handle the part about the storage. That's the one that's going to be a big push for us for sure. So again, I think this is a great start. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. Councillor Morton, you had a question or comment?
I did. Just a comment. During a conversation that I had not only with Mr. Velchich, but with Mr. Ramono as well, maybe it's not the town that actually tries to find a location for all of this stuff. When houses and that are torn down or changes are done, that perhaps there is another group out there that might be willing to store this stuff and look after selling it and things like that, and the money going to charity. We have those groups that are always looking for some financial help. So that's might be another area that we can look into.
Thank you, Councillor Morton. Mayor Hackson, you had a question or comment?
Thank you. I just know that over the years, when people are building or rebuilding new old homes and looking for heritage materials, that there are some places within the province that actually are go-to places that people have donated. And I'm wondering if long-term, if we can take a look at that and see if that may suffice. It would mean that anyone in our community that did have a heritage place and were doing a little renovating, that perhaps they could it could be donated, or someone who's bought a heritage place and they're in love with it and want to bring it back to the period, that that the organization would have pieces from our community. And I believe that at one point in Markham there was an area or a I won't say a lumber yard, but a contractor that actually had heritage pieces for people who were renovating heritage property. So perhaps we could have a look into it, and maybe we all can keep our eyes open for such a thing. And that way, then the good pieces that are in these homes that we know are disappearing could have a second life.
Okay, good comment. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? None opposed? Motion's carried. All right, we'll move on to the last one we have, Development Service Planning Branch Report, the 2019-60, update to the name inventory for streets and other municipal assets. Mr. Ramuno, could you shed some light?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. So this is really, my understanding is it's been a couple of years since the this street name list was brought to council for an update. So we've attached the current approved street name list, as well as the street naming policy for council's review and consideration. And in addition, over this past year, we have identified, we've received 2 requests for additions to our bank of street names listed in recommendation 2. First one being Marlene Johnston Drive, and then the second being another individual in town, Viv Agresti. So those 2 have been requested to be added to our street naming list that would then be used and provided to developers when they're coming forward with their development applications for use as future street names.
Okay. Can I have a mover for this, please? Hackson? Okay, are there any questions or comments? Mayor Hackson?
Thank you. I'm just wondering, I know that on the retirement of Councillor Johnson, one of the developers had donated a street with her name. And I believe that what happens is, and if you could correct me if I'm wrong, I believe what happens is half of the streets are named by the developer, and it's their choice of whatever name they choose. And sometimes we look at these names and think, where on earth did they ever come from? And then the other half, it comes from our list. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure how it's been working here in the past, but what we do as staff, when we do have a council-approved street list, we provide that to the developers who have applications, subdivision applications, and we suggest that they look at the list and use what names that they feel appropriate. In some instances, they also come forward with their own names. So then we eventually bring another report for council's consideration to approve the final street names for any given plan of subdivision. And then we do indicate in that report whether the name comes from our council-approved street name list or if it's been proposed by the developer. So sometimes it is a combination. But council always has the final say when we come back with a report on final approval of any street names in town.
Thank you. Just if I can continue just for a moment. And so as new names are proposed to us through the community, I'm sure we all have somebody tap us on the shoulder in the grocery store and say, by the way, you know, so-and-so passed away, and we would be really nice to recommend them for a street name. And we put it forward. Do we actually have some kind of a bio or some kind of something greater than just a name? Is there a checklist, I suspect, to say that the contributions that they gave to the community were substantial, or there was something maybe even regionally, provincially, or even nationally that they have been recognized for, that we could, rather than just a name that somebody comes along with because they feel it's important, to help us decide if it's important for us as well.
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, it's a good point. Our street naming policy does identify, I think it's 4 or 5 criteria with respect to how we evaluate any proposed names that come forward. And the key ones are, you know, whether it's a natural feature or a geographic location. The other ones relate to whether it's a historic place in town, or whether, you know, if it's an individual, so the history of the individual, if it's the person was an outstanding resident or a long-time resident in town. So there are some criteria that we evaluate those names prior to bringing those to council. But I think moving forward, we'll take a closer look at the policy and those requests that do come in. But there is a bit of an evaluation that staff undertake with respect to the criteria that's listed in the policy.
Thank you. I think that's really important. I know that people are watching today's proceedings, and quite often we get asked, how do you have a street name named in the to honor someone? And I think that's really important to let people know that there is a vetting process that takes place as well. And for those that have been above and beyond in our community, then they're certainly recognized. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Persechini, you had a question?
Yes, to you, to Mr. Romano. Is it possible to get the criteria so we all understand how the people qualified for this, and so we have a better judgment when we do vote on streets? You know, so if there's a criteria, the standard that for all, so we have something. You know, maybe we could put this in a motion that we need, you know, these people need to be, you know, criteria. According to the criteria, that's how they get in there. So if somebody stops by and asks you, oh, I think that person should be in there, or that person, they has to fit the category of the criteria before. And then we have a standard, you know, form that they have to qualify. Thank you.
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly we have that approved policy with respect to the criteria, and we'll make sure that that's available to everybody. And I think it may, if it's not on our website, we'll make sure it's on our website. And moving forward, and I don't think we've done this in the past, but moving forward, when we do bring forward a requested street names for council's consideration for a new subdivision, we'll provide additional information in those reports with respect to how it was vetted and how those names meet our policy. The other thing I don't think I mentioned is these names are also vetted through our EMS and the region, just to ensure that, and we have policies in place to ensure that there's no duplicate name being used throughout the region, and it can be easily pronounced and read for emergency services perspective. So it's also vetted from that perspective as well.
Thank you. Councillor Morton, you had a question or comment?
Just a comment. Going through the list, the large list, there are many soldiers' names, not only on the present list that we have, but also streets that have already been named. And I've been starting to work with staff to get the information on all the soldiers that have been recognized already, and ones that names are still on the list, so that we do have that information in our stuff, that we can really know why they are there and what were they fought in, and that sort of thing. So that will be another as we're moving forward. So.
Thank you. Councillor Carruthers, you had a question.
Thank you. I think it is time we took a deeper look at this. I think one thing that's missing from the policy is around purpose, that these names should align with our town values. There could be a prominent citizen in town whose actions don't align with our town values. So I think it's important that we provide the rationale, that the rationale highlight how the individual, or if it's a place, or if it's there's a lot of vegetation on this, that whatever name we choose align with our town values and priorities. I also think it's important that we do a proper vetting, that all names are run through a Google search. We have the story of a school naming that when Google searched turned out to be a porn star. So it was, they have to be very careful with some of the naming, that when you do a Google search, the first thing that comes up is the street name, not something else. So I would like to see that. I'd like to see the rationale. I don't understand why Vivagretzi is on this list right now, because it has to be held because we can't put a living individual. And without knowing this individual, and with this individual still having hopefully a long life ahead of them, I don't think it's appropriate to be putting it on the list at this time.
You've piqued my interest. I'm going to have to ask you after council what that school was. Okay. Councillor Roy DiClemente, you had a question or comment?
Sure, I can follow that act. Further to Councillor Carruthers' comments, I think some of my reasoning was in a similar fashion, that this policy was done in 2011 or 2011. It probably could use a bit of a refresh to bring it into line with municipal Freudian slip. Best practices, not breast practices. So a policy update would be appropriate. I think it would be helpful if we clarify who is doing the naming, the practice of having developers submit names that haven't been vetted through our policy. Is that one that we want to adopt, or is there a different way of putting it? I think having an understanding of the individual criteria when the names are brought to us, what those criteria are and how those names meet those criteria, whether it's a natural heritage feature or whether it's a prominent individual and what their contributions to society were. And I think it's also important for us to somehow find a way to retain that context and give and be able to provide some reasoning for people when they take possession of the home. in my case, I moved in. Who the heck was David Wilson, and why does he get a name? And I think from that perspective, it's for new residents who want to understand the history of their community. I think that's a helpful piece of information. And of the other part of it, and I know we struggled with this in the past when we've addressed this, was the creating a priority for some of these names. So for example, I think we have a former mayor who has a street that only has 2 driveways on it if they're lucky. And I think that person deserved a street that had a little bit more prominence, that was a little, more of a local collector road rather than and so there's a few complexities and layering in here that I think we need to be careful of. And I know we've talked about this in the past, but I don't know if we've brought it up at this point, is also location. So if an individual was known for their work in the village of Holt, then we certainly wouldn't want to be naming something off Highway 11 after them. And I think there's some of that in other documents, not the one that's before us today, but I think we need to be very mindful of that process as well. To echo Mayor Hackson's comments, I was pretty sure we already had a Marlene Johnson Drive. And again, I personally don't know. I'm not sure if it's a male or female, Agresti, but I don't have any context here to be. I wouldn't even know if they're alive or not. So I don't have any context to be able to make a reasonable decision on the proposed list at this time. Thank you.
Any other questions, Mayor Hackson?
Not a question, just a comment. Sounds like it's a workshop for us. Thank you.
Who would have guessed we'd had this much of a robust discussion around street names? Councillor Foster.
Just a comment to go a little further on what Councillor Roy D. Clemente said. I always chuckle when I drive through Holland Landing and see a Frank Kelly Drive. And I kind of chuckle to myself when I drive through Queensville and see Councillor Morton's father, Ben Sinclair's name on a street in Queensville. So when you look at somebody like Frank Kelly, although he was a councillor for the whole of East Gwillimbury, he was a very dedicated person to the village of Sharon, and his name should be in there. Same as Ben Sinclair was a lifelong Mount Albert person, and we've got his name in Queensville. It just kind of doesn't jive right. So just some further ideas for the criteria that we were talking about.
All good points. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, can I have a vote? All in favor?
Point of order, I think there was some question about this coming back with more information about Viv Agresti. Is that what was wanted, or are we adding this name to the list with no context?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So with respect to Viv Agresti, it's the family member put that name forward, and the person is still living. So it's proposed to be added to the reserve list at this time, because the policy speaks to living individuals or names only being used for folks when they've passed. But I think what I've heard is, subject to what council's direction, I think staff will come back in the new year, whether it's a workshop or not, with some proposed updates to the street naming policy and criteria to make it clear moving forward. And certainly when we do come forward with a future development application where street names are being recommended, we'll provide more detail with respect to whether the history of the names being proposed and et cetera for council's consideration. But I agree the policy does need an update, and we can bring this back early in the new year.
Councillor Carruthers, you were going to suggest something?
I would suggest an amendment to remove Viv Agresti from the list at this point, and it can come forward at a future date. So I'll make that motion, that amendment.
Mayor Hackson, it was your motion. You're fine with that? Okay, we'll treat that as a friendly amendment. Councillor Roy D. Clemente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It seemed to me that we were also, at this point, we're receiving and we're considering further revising and updating the list, but we haven't actually asked for we haven't given direction to staff to update the policy, bring it back to us, have further discussion with us, and maybe even do any, we didn't raise this, but do some community outreach to get some more material, if you will. But I think it would be appropriate if we embedded that either in this resolution or in a subsequent one.
Let's, why don't we do so we have a motion on the floor right now to remove Viv Agresti from the list. Let's vote on that, and then we can vote on your motion. Councillor Roy DeClemente, okay. All in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion is carried. All right, Councillor Roy DeClemente, you had another motion.
That we would amend the resolution further, that council direct staff to prepare a report with a revision to the policies in accordance with municipal best practices, and coordinate a future workshop for council's consideration.
Are there any questions on that? Seeing none, I'll just let the clerk catch up. Are we good with that? All right, all in favor? None opposed? Motion is carried. And I believe that is it for development services. Back to you, Madam Mayor. Oh, sorry. Any questions for Mr. Ramuna? Mr. Ramuna, do you have any additional comments that you'd like to provide?
Nothing further at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Back to you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, just a point of procedure. I was under the impression that we voted on amending the original motion, but we didn't actually vote on the final resolution. Am I correct? There were friendly amendments. Okay, then we're good.
Got that all straightened away. Good to go. We are at item H, and that's community infrastructure and environmental services with Councillor Carruthers in the chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. We have 3 reports before you today. The first one is about our fleet strategy, and I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Molinari.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're very pleased to have this report before Council today. It represents a significant amount of work that's been completed and led through our Manager of Operations, Jeff Meggett. The report essentially establishes the framework for the business unit and formalizes a strategy based on the presentation that was provided at the last CWC. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. There's a lot of work that's gone into this, and we appreciate that. We have 3 recommendations: one, that it be received; second, that it be endorsed; and third, that staff continue to refine the fleet strategy and report further to council as the strategy evolves. Can I have someone move those 3 recommendations? Councillor Crone, is there any questions? Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For me, the financial sustainability of the fleet reserve is of importance, and the report itself notes that there's 2.7 million in the reserve at the time of the writing of the report. If we were to pass the budget that's proposed for this year, that reserve would drop to 1.2 million. So for me, I would, not just that staff would be refining the fleet strategy, but that they would also, when they report back to us, they would include details on the financial sustainability of the fleet reserve.
Would you like to add that recommendation?
Sure.
Mr. Clerk, do you have that? Thank you. Is there any other questions? Seeing none, can I have a vote for those 4 recommendations? All in favor? That's carried, none opposed. Okay. Next, we have a report on the Leslie Valley Servicing Agreement. And we have 2 recommendations before us on that, one to receive and one to authorize the execution of the servicing agreement. Mr. Molinari?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is another good news story and also represents a significant amount of work that's been taking place between the town of Newmarket and the town of East Gwillimbury, basically to allow us to extend servicing to accommodate additional employment lands outside of the original servicing boundary. So that has significant impacts in allowing us to advance some development applications and bring additional employment into the town. So it's a great news story, and we're happy to be able to bring that to council today and allow us to execute the agreement.
Thank you again for another good news story. Can I have someone move receipt and authorization to execute the servicing agreement? Councillor Foster. Are there any questions on this one? Mr. Crone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate this report, and I notice on page 3 you make reference to the fact that our costs are going to drop from approximately $10,000 a month to about $5,500 a month. I was just wondering if that's going to be ultimately reflected in our water and wastewater budget as it comes forward.
Mr. Molinari.
Through Madam Chair, all the costs, there's no profit in the water wastewater budget, so all the costs that are associated with it, any savings will ultimately be reflected in the rates going forward.
Thank you. Further questions, Madam Mayor?
Not a question, just a comment. Thank you very much to staff. I know that we have a few lines here in a small report, but I believe that this was a great deal of time to make something happen that is going to make a tremendous difference in our community. So please thank those others that aren't here today on the amount of time and effort that it took. And I know it was more than one department, but it's very much appreciated.
And that's a good point. A number of these reports, when we meet on our regular weekly meetings, they're on the list of being worked on and being moved forward week after week. So many of these things I've seen for months, really. So it's nice to see them being finalized here today. Is there any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. Lastly, we have a proposal for award of contract that will end up saving us some money in the long run on our uniforms. Mr. Molinari.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a third good news story for today for CIS, and essentially represents a partnership between CIS and CPRC for the provision of uniforms and clothing. And what's notable about this particular item is that the vendor has put in place a fairly robust website that reduces the administration for town staff to be able to manage this overall project and allows consistency for staff in terms of clothing across various departments. Also noteworthy is the fact that the vendor is holding their price for a 5-year period, which represents great value for the town.
Thank you very much. And the award of contract for $268,295 is within the current budget and will be in budgets going forward. That's a 5-year number, and that is in line with what we've spent in the past. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is correct.
Thank you. Can I have someone move receipt? The first be it resolved is missing the words be received, but I'm sure that's what the intention was. And the second one is the award of the contract. Can I have someone move those two? Councillor Persechini. Questions? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. And that's all we have today as far as reports. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, Mr. Molinari, do you have anything to add?
Nothing further at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll return the chair back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're at item I, Community Parks, Recreation and Culture with Councillor Persechini in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have 3 items here. The first one is Community Park Erection Culture Center, CPRC 2019-28, Streetscape and Public Urban Design Signature Planner on page 56 to 69 you have in front of you. General Manager, do you have any comments on this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just briefly, this is a public realm streetscape and urban design program that builds on an existing program that we currently have operating. This program further supports civic pride, community history and identity, placemaking principles, streetscape aesthetics, as well as promoting the town as green and environmentally friendly. I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Councillor Carruthers?
Thank you. I think this is a fantastic initiative, and I love the examples that we're getting. The painted canoes in Holland Landing, I think are a wonderful cultural celebration, and we want to make it very clear that it's not appropriation, that it is celebration. So I see the canoes are coming from the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. If we could have a plaque that identifies that, so that we aren't accused of any cultural appropriation. It's a really wonderful way to celebrate, and I think a plaque, some sort of small plaque that gives some background on that would be very beneficial. Thank you.
Okay, could I have a mover on this? Moved by Councillor Morton. Any other questions of the committee? Yes, Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, and I'm really excited. This is a wonderful project. I think it'll be a great benefit to the community. I was just wondering if there was any involvement with our arts and culture committee, or even our local horticulture clubs that we have in the town, to get their advice or opinion or involvement in some shape or form.
General Manager Converson.
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. With council endorsement for the program, there will be community consultation with our committees of council, as well as our stakeholder groups who we partner with numerous partnership programs, as Councillor Crone had indicated.
Any other questions? Councillor Morton.
Just a comment. I know that staff are working very, very hard on the Mount Albert Community Park and the downtown area, and with it being rural, and the idea of putting wagons and tractors in there for the not only for the flowers with the wagons, but certainly the idea of using tractors as public art. And I know that we are trying to find both so that we can get them ready for when the park is finished. So I'm excited about it, and I'm sure that Councillor Crone will be when he sees the wagons and tractors and reflecting the rural area that we both represent are going to be amazing. So
Sounds exciting. Thank you. If there's no further questions, can I have a vote, please? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. The second item is Community Park Recs and Cultures Report on page 70 to 76. CPR C2019-29 Farmers Market. Local update. General Manager, do you have any comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is following up on a request by the Market Committee to review alternate locations. Some of the benefits of this particular location is space and ability to grow the market without restrictive covenants. It is a central location in town. It's visible and accessible, in particular from Leslie Street, which is a major collector, and does have good site access and circulation on site, improving the accessibility and reducing risk management with dedicated parking and pedestrian routes. I'd be happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Okay, can I have a mover, please? Okay, Councillor Crone. Any questions, member of the committees? Even know? Yes, go ahead. Was you moving it, or you were asking a question? Okay, sounds good. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to say I support the notion of moving the farmers market back centrally. I think it makes a lot of sense. I know the location at the Lowe's Plaza there could sometimes be arduous to get to. I also like the fact that it's equidistant, I think, for all members of residents of communities in East Gwillimbury. I don't want this question to sound as if it's non-support, because it's not. I do support the farmers market, but I think sometimes it's important to ask the uncomfortable questions. And so are we? What is the objective of having the farmers market? I know it's it's a town-sponsored program. Are we, is it to help, local vendors, local agribusiness? Is it to give our residents another place to shop? Are we, and what metrics are we measuring the success of this market? I don't want to sound like I'm again, that I'm not supportive. I am, but I think it's important that we realize that we're doing all that we can for this committee and making sure it's the best use of resources at the same time. Just wondering for some feedback on that.
General Manager Comerson.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's an excellent question that we could certainly present to the committee to perhaps present back to council on the benefits of the market and perhaps some metrics that could be quantified and reported back to council. So I'd be happy to further that if it's the direction of council.
Thank you. Councillor Carruthers.
Further to that,
sorry.
I'm interested in knowing the percentage of vendors that are actually from EG, because if the purpose is to highlight local businesses, I know a number of the businesses are not from EG, but they do add to the market. If we eliminated them, then the market would be very small. But I just want to know, what we're doing to encourage more local businesses, because I think that's very important. So a report back, I would be happy to add a recommendation that we get a report back as per what Councillor Crone was discussing. Someone else has to help me with the wording on that, but I think a report back on objectives and metrics of the market, including the number of vendors that, or percentage of vendors that are from EG.
Thank you. Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I think there's just two of us here that were here when this was initially kicked off, and the idea was to celebrate that East Gwillimbury is an agricultural community. Having said that, it's sometimes difficult when we're dealing with very large vegetable producers and grain, dairy farms, to have them come to our market. I would say I was the liaison this last year with the market, and they certainly worked very hard to try and get people from East Gwillimbury. Having said that, this is their busy time of the year, and so they did have some, but by no means was it the largest percentage. Having said that, they also, if they have fresh vegetables, they're not going to have 15 vendors of fresh vegetables. They're going to have 2 or 3. So those that are there and have paid their money for the booth are successful. They try to look far and wide for a lot of different kinds of vendors that appear in other markets, and I know that Newmarket has been running several years, so has Aurora. They have a very different venues than what we had, and they had people that came from, I would say, the northern GTA, certainly within York region, South Simcoe, something unique, a unique niche that they had that was very busy, and to try and put them into ours as well. We have some vendors that come for the full time. They are seasonal vendors that are there every week. And then we have other vendors that want to try it out for a few weeks and see if it's going to work for them. Sometimes they stay, sometimes they don't. And some that we find as a corporate community perhaps don't fit in with what our market is. And so it's many moving pieces along the way. I think this is a really good opportunity for our community. When you take a look at the very successful farmers markets in other communities, it's always within walking distance of the residents. And it really made it difficult, as I said yesterday about the wind and the weather and whatever, it made it very difficult for people to walk to. this is going to be right within, immersed in our community of Sharon, and people can certainly walk to it. There's no reason why the number of bikers that we have now, that cyclists that could certainly come from Holland Landing and other areas as well. So the hope is that people will come to the market on their way home as they travel along Leslie Street, and it is quite busy now. But also that our residents that are within walking distance, and I'm not sure what the numbers are that we have in Sharon now as far as homes, but certainly a lot greater than it was many years ago when the market was first, the decision was made to have a market, that those folks will utilize it on a daily basis. And the third piece of it that I think is pretty important as well is our staff that are here. And our staff at the end of the day will be able to take full advantage of all the fresh fruits, vegetables, and et cetera that are out here. So I look at this as a new initiative for a program that needed to make some changes. It may not be perfect, but I think we can make it a wonderful market just with the facilities here that we have.
Well said. Councillor Crowder, can you read it? 'Cause it's a little small for me there, your motion there, and we'll vote on that.
That council requests the Farmers Market Working Group to report back on objectives and metrics of the market, including the number of vendors representing East Gwillimbury. And to the mayor's comments, I just want to say I'm very supportive of this. I want to see this succeed. And I understand the balance of having vendors locally as well as vendors that will show up every month or every week, and really add to the market. The other thing that I would want the Farmers Market Working Group to look at is with, and it won't be a motion, just something that to keep in mind, with Vince's newly expanded across the way and the farmers market being so close, that maybe there's some outreach there to make sure that we're not in direct competition. Maybe they would like to, have a tent that highlights local produce that they have in their store. But I think having an outreach to them to find out how they fit in with this being so very close to their store, and their store being so brand new, the expansion, I think it's worth an outreach to them.
Thank you. Madam Mayor?
I can let you know that Vince's Market are planning on having a booth this coming year, and I suspect that someone from their organization may even be a part of our ongoing committee.
Very good. Going to have a vote on that. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you, carried. Now let's have a motion to receive it. All in favor? Okay. I'm sorry.
Through Mr. Chair is added to the initial motion. So Councillor Crone was the initial mover of the whole recommendation.
Yes, we voted that and everybody was in favor. Now to receive the documents, I'm assuming
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is the first paragraph of the motion.
Yes. And it's all done. Okay, good. Okay. The third one here I have is Community Park and Recreations and Culture Report, CPRC 2019-30, tennis permit fees. General Manager Carruthers, do you have any comments on this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is a recommended fee structure that was developed with the tennis club, and it will help to offset some of the operating costs for that program. Should be noted that we are doubling our court inventory over the next 2 years in our communities, and court time will be focused on public tennis through permits, drop-in, as well as supporting the programs and partnership programs with the town and league play. Should also be noted that over 100 residents are members or enrolled in registered programs and partnership programs with the town and the tennis club. Be happy to answer any questions related to the report.
Thank you, General Manager. Have a vote to receive. Motion, sorry. Councillor Crone, all in favor? Opposed? Member of the committees, do you have any other questions and comments? And do you have anything to add on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, nothing further. Thank you.
Any comments from the committee? Yes, or questions? Madam Mayor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, I know that tennis with our young lady from Mississauga that was so very successful, and some other younger people that are really getting involved in tennis, that I expect that our tennis will increase dramatically in the next few years. And I'm wondering if are we taking advantage of this trend in offering programs in the summertime for our community. And would the tennis club be a part of it, because they do have pros that are working there, or would we be seeking out other individuals?
Good. Anything you want to add to General Manager?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do work very closely with tennis, and we have noted the momentum with increasing membership, not only due to population, but also due to the popularity of the sport, and certainly some high-profile Canadian tennis players that have had some success in recent years. We will continue to not only build upon our infrastructure, our court space, but we'll also build upon our soft services or our programming, namely our partnership programming with tennis, as an example, our tennis camps. So we work with the East Gwillimbury Tennis Club to have their instructors teach our tennis camps. It only benefits us to work with the club and build that relationship to build the sport and tennis services for our residents.
Sounds really good. We got a lot of things to be excited about. How many tennis courts are we? I forgot, but they are going to be building new ones. I know that this is quite active and it's really busy and very successful. I think we got 2 more coming soon.
Through you, Mr. Chair, a total of 5 courts, 3 in Queensville and 2 in Holland Landing, Ridgeview Park, will be added on in by next summer.
It's a good news story. Anyway, there's nothing else from me. Madam Mayor, back to you. Thank you. The questions, Councillor Carruthers at the end there.
Sorry. The chart that you've provided has an asterisk beside East Gwillimbury, but the asterisk doesn't refer to anything that I can see. So just wondering what that means. Go down a little bit farther, right there.
General Manager, comments?
I'm assuming it was meant to be a definition of East Gwillimbury resident, something like that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it just denotes how special East Gwillimbury is.
Sounds good to me.
We need a thumbs up emoji there instead. So, just to clarify, the hourly rate in the chart is only for people who want to book a specific time, but the drop-in remains that people can drop in and use the tennis courts anytime it's not booked, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Thank you very much.
Sounds good. Now back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We are now at item J, corporate services with Councillor Morton in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All the staff of our corporate services have been very busy for the last few days. So, Mr. Velchich, I'm not sure that you have anything else to report, but do you?
Nothing at this time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any questions from committee for Mr. Velchich? Hearing none, Madam Mayor, I turn the chair back to you.
We are now under item K, emergency and community safety services with Councillor Roy DeClemente in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have one item on our prepared agenda, which is a emergency and community safety services memorandum regarding an animal welfare update. Chief, did you have anything to add to this?
Through to the chair, no, not at this time.
Members of committee, may I have a motion? Moved by Councillor Persechini. Any questions, comments, discussion? I had one. Just out of curiosity, the last part of the memorandum notes that a bylaw is being drafted, but I'm not quite sure, given that the memorandum outlines the resources available to our residents, I'm not sure what gap we're trying to address with the bylaw. Maybe Ms. Nichols could.
Yeah, sorry, through you to the chair. I'll defer to Jennifer
Okay.
Nichols, manager of bylaw.
Good morning.
Good morning, Council. In front of you is just a memorandum of an animal welfare update. Basically, what it entails is currently the provincial government has introduced new legislation on animal welfare. And that would be new offenses, dog fighting, increased penalties, that sort of thing, as well as an increase in inspectors for the province. This is currently staff are looking at drafting up a animal control bylaw specific to husbandry, some issues that we've had in the past. And included in that, the intent is to put the pigeon piece that was brought forward as well. So staff are intended to bring forward a proposed bylaw for council for Q1 of 2020 with some of those issues.
Okay, and we're not, we're within our bounds, given that the province has legislation to take care of some of these. Are we within our bounds within the Municipal Act to regulate these things?
So the Municipal Act doesn't give us the authority to mandate the animal welfare piece. I've done some research on other municipal bylaws, which do have some limited husbandry animal welfare pieces in it. And basically it's just reasonable care for the animal, clean, sanitary environment, food, water, shelter. Those type of things, and speaks to tethering a little bit. So if that's council's appetite to potentially have that in a future bylaw, staff can certainly consider that.
So it would be more of a common sense bylaw than it would necessarily be something that we would be enforcing from a regulatory perspective.
That's correct, the province.
Thank you for clarifying that. Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. When we talk about this bylaw, I'm wondering if we can use the words animal welfare, because that seems to be a lot of the calls that we're getting. It's not so much control as people concerned about welfare. In the report, it says that as of June 29th, our animal control have not received any calls for service, but we had a number of complaints that didn't go through there. So I'm wondering if we need to do more to promote that 1833 number so people know who to call. So it doesn't have to be part of any resolution, but I'm just wondering if our communications department could maybe do a little bit more to promote the Ontario Animal Protection Call Centre number through our social media channels, and perhaps even on our town webpage, since we did have a number of calls over the summer.
Is that something we can take care of? Right.
That's certainly, yeah. Through the chair, I did get communications to put that information on the website, so that is provided. But certainly, something more prevalent and bold may be beneficial.
Mayor Hackson.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Carruthers. I just wonder if that could be also given to all members of council, just to have it in their hands should we need it. And when we least expect it, that's the time that number, we can't quite find it. If I think that would be very helpful for all of us. Thank you.
So we had a motion on the floor. Any further questions? All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you very much, Ms. Nichols. Chief, did you have anything further to bring up in this area?
Nothing at this time, thanks.
Okay. Members of committee, anything to raise? Seeing none, I'll turn the chair back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're under administration, item L, with myself in the chair, and we have one item. Mr. Webster, would you like to address this one, please?
Madam Mayor, this was I already provided a verbal update on it at a prior session with council. It's regarding a York Regional Police community matter. And we do have town staff led through our communications branch. We're working with them on messaging to the community and on setting up in fairly short order a community meeting on this matter.
Thank you. Questions of Mr. Webster? Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Webster, do we have a proposed date for this meeting?
I will defer to the Director of Communications, Laura Hanna.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. At this time, there's no date, but we'll be sure to communicate that as soon as we have it set.
Thank you. I think the community certainly has done a lot of, there's been a lot of noise on social media and text messages amongst neighbors and so on, that there's a fair amount of anxiety out there, and this would go a long way to kind of alleviate some of it. Thank you.
Could I have a motion to receive? Councillor Roy DeClemente. All those in favor? That's carried. We're at item M, and that's other business, and we have the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee report with their terms of reference. Any questions on that? I have a mover and a seconder. Sorry, just a mover. Councillor Roy DeClemente. All those in favor? That's carried. And an adjournment at this time. Are we adjourning or are we going into budget?
I'll defer to the clerk, but I believe we have added, this agenda was amended yesterday, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Pursuant to council direction. Item N is continuation of the business plan and budget deliberation. I understand that Mr. Valchich and his staff team have a position to bring forward to council. So could I suggest a very short recess, possibly, and then we'll reconvene short order?
We'll reconvene at 11:40. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to bring this meeting back to order. Way too much fun here. We are live, and we will continue as we go into our budget deliberations at this point. And Mr. Velchik, will you be taking over at this point?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will just make a couple of opening comments just to set the stage, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Marshall. So yesterday, the Budget Committee had a very productive morning of budget deliberations, and at the end of those deliberations had set some overarching final objectives in terms of what you'd like the tax levy and overall budget to look like. Staff worked very hard collectively throughout the balance of yesterday and into this morning to bring back to you a final proposal that we believe meets the objectives that you set out for us to achieve. And our goal would be to confirm those with you at this point and get Budget Committee's endorsement of what we've proposed, and then to bring back to you final recommendations at the evening meeting on the 17th of Council for final consideration and adoption of the budget. So with that, I'd like to just have Mr. Marshall perhaps come to the podium. We just have a few short slides that we believe summarize an approach that fulfills the objectives that you set out for us yesterday.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of committee. Yesterday during our budget discussions, staff had tabled some options to reduce the draw on the development and fee supported reserve, particularly related to the development engineering reserve. So we had tabled some options, and committee was supportive of those options. So this slide just kind of shows the final numbers that we've proposed that would end up reducing that that proposed draw. So the budget for the vacant position, actually with salaries and benefits, turned out to be about $105,000. The amount that we had allocated for staff that are in development engineering, being charged to development engineering, but are doing work that relates to tax supported operations, is $75,000. Through our bill and engineering review that we will be doing in Q1 2020, we're projecting about $70,000 in additional revenues for the 2020. And we have removed $55,000 from the corporate contingency budget and applied it to this, excuse me, this reserve draw. So for a total reduction of in the draw on the reserve of $305,000, which is about 35% of the budgeted draw that we had proposed originally. So based on the discussions that we had yesterday, this is where we are proposing to come in at. So we started the day yesterday at 3.4%. We were directed to maintain the mosquito control program at its original level, and also fund the proposed new fire inspector from the multi-year dedicated tax contribution. So in addition to that, we've had to add back that $75,000 that we showed on the previous slide that represents work that's done on the tax supported operations program. And with all those all in, we come to a proposed tax levy increase of 2.8%, 1.8% representing the pressure on the base programs, which is lower than the what inflation is tracking right now, and 1% for the dedicated multi-year funding plans. So that 2.8% represents about $45 on the average homeowner for an annual increase, which is about $3.75 per month. So based on the discussions that we'll be having now, if committee is happy with the position that we're in, the clerk has some resolutions that we would hope that committee would endorse and bring forward to December 17th. We'll be also providing a report to council at that time that would approve and adopt the proposed budget for 2020. So that includes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marshall. It's a quick turnaround. It's less than 24 hours, I think. Thank you very much. Are there questions from members of committee? Councillor Persechini.
Just a comment. I just want to thank you to the team and Mark for going back and listening to us and going back with what we requested. So thank you, and to all the team and everyone involved.
Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. Can you just back up to the slide with the chart? This one, yes. We have 1% dedicated to increased service level. And then the balance would be 1.8, which is below the rate of inflation. So as much as I want to keep taxes down, I worry about our long-term position when our tax levy is less than inflation. I worry about the compound effect of that going forward. The amount that we're drawing from reserves, council has mentioned several times about concern about our reserves. And I would be much more comfortable if our base tax levy increase was equal to cost of living at 1.95, I think is what we heard. And then the 1% dedicated increased services on top of that. I think that would put us in a better position for years to come, knowing that it is cumulative. And to use that difference, it's only 0.1%, I guess. But to use that to offset some of the draws from reserves so that we have those for future years.
Any other comments, questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think for me, I'd actually like to see it lower, but I also know that we've worked with we've got a couple of factors in play here, and we've worked very diligently to do the very best we could. From my perspective, we've heard that the huge impacts have to do with our human resources. And in this budget, we've increased training for our staff by over 30%. When we talk about long-term investment in our people, that in itself, I think, adds quite a bit of value from that perspective. This budget also includes a rather hefty, from my perspective, increase to salaries. It's been unusual for us to approve a COLA adjustment to that extent at 1.95. And I know that we will hear from residents in the community that their pensions aren't going up by 1.95%. Their salaries are not going up by 1.95%. Other public sector groups like teachers and so on are also not seeing those sorts of increases. And for me, I think that's an investment in our institution, in our people. And as I said, I would like to see it lower, but I can support it at 2.8. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? I'm not seeing anything else. Excuse me. So at this point, we have a motion to move forward to our budget deliberations on the 17th, is it? 17th of December, with the numbers that we have in mind now. I know that staff are continually scanning to make sure that the numbers that they have as far as cost of living, they do change. We know that. At one point, we used to use the OMERS, whatever OMERS had for an increase, that we use that number. We use a variety of numbers to find out that we're in the right place. So I would suspect that between now and then, should there be something drastic that comes along or something new that is going to make a substantial difference, that we are still meeting until the 17th, that there is always the opportunity to update us at any given point. So with that, Mr. Webster?
I think there's one clarification for full transparency here. So it's in this 1.95, and this might have been cribbed from last year. I think really what it is, it applies, that 1.95 is to all employees of the town, save and except unionized staff and staff that would have other contractual arrangements. So I just, so can we please change that to for all town employees? And then can we put in brackets, except for accepting, or whatever the proper wording would be, not including unionized staff or staff covered under other contractual arrangements. I think that's more transparent. Thank you.
Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to thank all the folks in corporate services for all your help in preparing this and getting this to this point. I certainly, from my perspective, I look at my very learned colleagues on either side of me. One is calling for more of an increase, and the other is calling for less of an increase, which tells me we probably got it right. We've balanced it down the middle, so I'm supportive of this. Thank you again for all your hard work.
Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I listened very carefully what Councillor Roy DiClemente said, and my comments yesterday were lower than that as well. But I do appreciate and understand the amount of work that corporate service staff have gone through in just a matter of a few hours. And even though I would like to see it lower as well, I will support the 2.8%.
Thank you. Councillor Foster, comment? No, you're fine? Okay. So we have in front of us now, be it resolved that the 2020 proposed business plan and budget be received, and that Budget Committee approve in principle the 2020 proposed operating business plan and budget, including new staffing requests with a total tax levy requirement representing an increase for base programs and services at 1.8% and a tax levy increase of 1% dedicated to service level increases for community safety and new facilities, and that Budget Committee approve in principle the 2020 proposed development and fee-supported business plan and budget as amended, and that Budget Committee approve in principle the 2020 proposed capital budget as amended, and that Budget Committee approve in principle a cost of living adjustment COLA for all town employees, excluding unionized staff and contract staff, of 1.95 to be implemented effective January 1st, 2020. Questions on the motion? Do I have a mover? Councillor Crone. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to direct staff that maybe at some time early in the new year, when our neighbours in the York region have completed their budget process, I'd love to see a roundup of where we fared against the rest of York region. We're very proud of the fact that we have the lowest relative tax rate in York region. We're in great shape financially, no debt, healthy reserves. I'd just like to see a roundup of where we stand again. Maybe it's the competitive nature in me, but I would just love to see that. We could have that at some point. Thank you.
I think it is the competitive nature in you, but I think everyone that sits up here has that competitive nature. Wonderful idea. And I know that all of our colleagues right across the 9 municipalities to the south, and even our colleagues to the north and northwest are all working diligently, and they all are doing the same business that we're doing. They're in the same business, and everybody has to find the right place that they're comfortable with, and knowing full well that we've got an exciting year coming forward. So with that, Mr. Webster.
Madam Mayor, if I may, prior to adjournment, there's just a couple updates that I wasn't able to offer at the time of administration update. So one would be on Friday, York Regional Council and is meeting with MPP Mulrooney and her MTO staff and Metro League staff, and CAOs and Director of Transportations as well are being invited. And they're going to get an update on many items, including such things as subways and GO Train routes, GO Train expansions, as well as highway and potential highway expansions. So following that meeting, I think we will be able to bring a memo update as to what was discussed to our next council meeting in December 17th. Looking ahead to 2020, and I know it's coming upon us quickly. Just want to confirm a couple of matters. The December 10th council workshop, which was reserved for budget deliberations, will not be required. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. The clerk will remove that from the calendar. Our first 3 workshops in the new year, and we're really on our A game now. January 14th, the topic will be diversity, inclusion, and inclusion. We're planning on getting a York Regional Police speaker involved. They have some real significant experience in this. We'll also be dealing at that time with some matters that we've set aside, such as proclamations, flying flags, and other matters such as that. So that'll be the first workshop of the new year. For February 14th, I believe that's the date, or is that the 11th? I think it's the 11th. We're proposing our annual growth management update. And so that'll be a multi-department update focusing on where we are on our road to continuing to deliver a complete community. And May 12th, at this point in time, we have one topic set aside, which is for reserves and financial full update on those. And we might reserve the second part of that, to play on the words a bit, for a second topic at this time. So I thought that we'd just sort of indicate where we're heading in the new year.
Thank you. Just because the budget's passed doesn't mean we're finished yet. Very good. Thank you. Any questions, comments? Councillor Persechini?
Was that December the 10th where no workshop, right? I want to cancel. Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that, could I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Persechini, and we will adjourn at 11:58. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. We'll be back at right now. Very good. So we will go in